Started. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the June 6, 2024 meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. I'm Don McWilliams. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. Due to the hybrid format of today's meeting, I'd like to start by providing some guidelines. Please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. For those in the room, please raise your name card to indicate an interest to speak. For the new members, we just kind of stick them up like that. For those attending virtually, please mute your microphones when not speaking. And if you have technical issues, try joining the meeting using a different device, smartphone or tablet, or you can use the call-in button on your meeting invite. For board members virtually, to indicate you want a desire to speak, either type question or chat or comment in the chat, or just raise your hand virtually and we'll keep an eye out for it. And then we will summarize agreement around recommendations at the end of each topic if necessary. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you for everybody coming. Stacy, can you get started on Tim's?
Tom Anderson.
Here.
Nancy Davidson has an excused absence. Jamie Finch.
Here.
Raj Gapandi.
Here.
Garam Khan.
Here.
Mina June. Here. Don McWilliams.
Here.
Dixie Bear is on her way. She'll be joining a bit late. Alex Lee Tigner. Here. Ann Newcomb. Here. Keith Gonzalez has an excused absence.
Stacy, are we still muted on there? Just saying.
Oh, no.
Can folks online hear us?
Oh, Dan confirmed he can.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. And then John Smith.
Here.
Great. And John's going to be sitting in as a regular member with Nancy absent. And we have quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the approval of the minutes. Is there any changes to the minutes from the previous meeting? Hearing none, the minutes are accepted. Stacy, do we have any public comments, either online or in person tonight?
We had 2 written comments from Connie Marsh and Ann Fletcher. I haven't heard indication from others to speak, but we do have members of the public in the room and online. So I kind of, oh, okay. Sorry. I'm going to check the sign-in form. Okay. So we do have members of the public that would like to speak.
Okay, very good. You have to read my public comment guide. So comments are an important part of the process. We take them seriously. For those of you joining us, if you could have, please go ahead and step up front or wherever you're comfortable. State your name, your address, relationship to the city, and then please speak clearly. Comments to 5 minutes.
So I can see you.
Well, good evening. My name is Ann Fletcher. I'm a resident of Issaquah and I'm affiliated with People for Climate Action, the Issaquah chapter. There are a couple of other supporters online, members, and in support of one other person that came in person. So my comments are about the midpoint checkup on the ICAP. And I already sent written comments. Some of you may have seen them, but they came out kind of late last night, so you may not have seen them. But I did, first of all, wanted to thank all the members of the Environmental Board. Environmental Board is near and dear to my heart. It was one of the things that PCA worked with the city on at the very beginning, just kind of start. So it's doing great work. So thank you and the sustainability staff were great to work with, and others who made this midpoint checkup on the ICAP such a comprehensive and illuminating document. It's amazing. But as I read it, I saw that the report showed that the Sustainability Department really has been working very hard and diligently, really not just hard, but diligently on implementing the ICAP. So far, our progress has, we've had progress towards some targets, obviously, in the report, but also there are many important targets that they're not being reached and yet. And so it brings up a lot of questions and concerns, of course. But the report recommends that we not change the ICAP until its regular review in 2026. And instead that the actions need to be prioritized differently and resources need to be brought in to actually get the movement towards the targets. And so I just want to say a couple things on that. One is the emphasis on buildings and energy and transportation, our two biggest emitters, is a really sound strategy. And sometimes it's really easy to lost. It's easy to get lost in the weeds, and then you have to surface and remember, oh, those are our biggest emitters. They're huge. Then two is that sustainability department seems to be making the most of getting grants, which is wonderful, and using consultants and so on. I know this process takes a lot of time. And so how do you have enough time and resources to do this? And budget requests that stem from this report will be key, I think, to improving our ICAP implementation. So on being more impactful, I had a couple things I want to say. One, are we doing enough in transportation and land use? I noticed that there was 6% on the action status pie, and transportation is our second biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emitter is what I mean by emitter. But maybe that was only the sustainability department, but it would be interesting to know if there are other departments like the transportation, the public works and so on that are working on the master mobility plan, you know, what actions are they doing? Second, I'm wondering how complete the Title 18 code revisions about sustainable design, missing middle housing, and incentivizing dense mixed-use transit-oriented development. That's quite a mouthful. And PCA's understanding was that there were still some climate-related revisions on Title 18 that were deferred until after the comp plan was going to be done. And if that's so, then I think it should be noted in the plan. Number three is, do we really want to wait for future years to address electrification outreach, incentives, and benchmarking? Since buildings and energy is our biggest greenhouse gas emitter, and existing buildings are the biggest part of that. Now, state legislation to help homeowners get assistance and know what the standards are, it did not pass, unfortunately, but it might next year. And it just behooves us, I think, to take some steps to get that going as soon as we possibly can. And the fourth thing is that all city departments affect climate change. And way back when we started, we were able to speak with sustainability people in Portland, Oregon, and they met emission reduction targets, top ones, 10 years ago by incorporating sustainability into the other departments through proximity and collaboration. So I'm wondering if there's anything our administration can do to support improved integration of the ICAP among all the departments. There were a couple of language suggestions that I had written down. I'm not going to go into those. It's kind of detailed things, but just something to look at. And then finally, back to the big picture. Climate issues are big, complicated, and darn tough. PCA Issaquah has been around for about 5 years, and PCA Regional Coalition has been around for about 10 years. And we're all learning together, and we're all working really hard on this. So important. So if they weren't so tough, though, people would already have something, right? So while acknowledging disappointment that our results are not really what we wanted, let's use what we've learned from this self-evaluation and build that stronger support within our department structuring and within our communications within the city. Let's add the resources. Let's add the resources we need. We spend lots of money on lots of things that are doing a lot of good, but this is so urgent. So we need something that will really strategically help us prioritize, intensify, and accelerate. So I also want to say this is very possible to do. And the probability of doing it will depend on how people respond to the messages in the report and from the community, and if they collaborate boldly. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Anybody else here to speak tonight? Could you please state your name, your address, your relationship to the city? Your comments to 5 minutes.
David Kapler at 255 Southeast Andrew Street in downtown Issaquah. We've been there for quite a few years. I am related to Ann Fletcher, so I guess two items. You see, Robin's going to be talking about the park plan. Good part of that park plan is going to be trails, and trails are a great way for people to get places. It would have been a nice night tonight to use the trails to get here instead of traffic jams everywhere. But so there's some implications there that a recreation part, but also in terms of transportation, trails are really, really important. Now, the downtown neighborhood that I live in has been zoned duplex for over 40 years, maybe 50 years. And Nancy Davidson, Jamie, and myself, and Ann and I, we all have single family homes in that area. There are a few duplexes. And now with changes and laws about accessory dwelling units and detached and attached and those kinds of things, there's a chance of getting more people living in those areas where we have the 554 bus, we're close to many amenities, and you know, it's really an efficient place to live that way. So I'm hoping we can be working to encourage those kinds of things. One of the biggest problems we're facing right now, and it's not really a subject of your committee, but if you have a rental and people decide to be squatters instead of renters, it might be 5 months before you even can get to a judge. And we need to be able to deal with our climate by concentrating people and being able to them live where there's services, transportation, and the quality of life. And we can have that in downtown Issaquah, but there's laws now, or lack of law, that's causing us not to be able to efficiently use our city. Thank you.
Anybody online, Stacy?
Anyone online wish to speak, you can raise your hand or send a chat.
Oh, okay, we'll move on. All right, first up tonight on our agenda is a park plan update by Robin Spears. Hi, Robin.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces there. And actually, speaking of trails, David and I have been going back and forth about trails and some development that happened in the past all week. So it's good to see you, David. But I'm happy to give everybody an update on where we are in the process of the park system, get feedback on an exciting concept we've been working on the past few months, and walk you through some of the draft chapters that we're developing with Design Workshop, and where we're focusing specifically on incorporating environmental elements and goals, like sustainability that was just mentioned a few minutes ago. Okay, next slide, please. So we've been working through the development of the plan in more detail since the winter, and throughout our analysis of the system and the key components, some key components kept surfacing between when we talked about reaches of our valley floor and how we navigate through the urban context, both in a physical and social way, and how we interact with the natural environment in the valley, the forested areas of the neighborhoods and the mountains, the creeks and waterways that the city was built around and still strives to preserve today, and the ability to connect, as we've been just mentioning, via trails to the peaks of the surrounding mountains. So as we talked more in detail about that through with our consultants, one moment really felt like a breakthrough. And I don't know if any of you are runners, kind of how you get that runner's high after you've been going for a while. Designers kind of get that too. So when Design Workshop brought up a slide that said forests, creeks, reaches, and peaks, as we were starting to really dig into the analysis, we kind of thought we could condense that down into a simple format of creeks to peaks. So these distinct physical features that we were working through, along with a diverse community that values culture, history, and social connections, the theme of Creeks to Peaks has emerged as kind of the new green necklace idea. So we're really excited to look at this version, kind of green necklace version 2.0, as an expansion of connectivity for the parks and trails, with the goal of connecting every park, open space, and greenway through our trail and multimodal paths, kind of still hitting those sustainability and design goals. So weaving our way from our more urban downtown areas through our neighborhoods and into the mountains that surround us. Okay, next slide, please. So as we were working through the plan, we wanted to come up with sort of a concept statement that would really reflect what we thought Creeks to Peaks would mean to the community. And we came up, after probably 20 iterations, we came up with these two that we wanted to run by everybody tonight and kind of get your feedback on. The first one, Issaquah's Creeks to Peaks Park System, a diverse system of parks, trails, and open spaces that unites the Issaquah community from the creeks along the valley floor, through wooded hillsides, to the peaks of Issaquah Alps. And the second one, a diverse park system of parks, trails, and open spaces winding along our valley floor from our creeks, through wooded hillsides and neighborhoods, all the way to the peaks of the Issaquah Alps, fostering connections between people and the places they cherish. So I just kind of want to open that up for a few minutes and get your initial intake on what you feel resonates better with you, on what aspects you like of those two concepts. If you need any more definition of Creeks to Peaks or explanation, we can dig into that a little bit more. But any initial feedback or comments would be great.
Yes, John.
I like the first one the best because it's more concise. I
Architects.
think fewer words is better.
Okay.
Amy?
As evidence, very common like that. I love the concept. I think the only thing that you said in kind of the preamble, Robin, that I'm not sure comes across in either, is the connectivity and how important different, like the ways of accessing the different amenities, both creeks and peaks. So that's the only thing I think I would probably side with Jonathan on the first one, but that's maybe the one element that could be strengthened. But otherwise,
Okay.
I really enjoy the concept.
That's great.
Anne?
Thanks, Don. And Newcomb here. I also like the first one. And part of it's because it's short, and then also I see wildlife as part of it and not just people, unless you're considering people as a broader people like the Native Americans do.
Definitely. Yeah.
Is that what you were thinking when you said people as a broader? Anyway, I think.
Yeah, certainly community as a whole, which definitely includes the indigenous peoples, the indigenous tribes here.
Okay, and then what about wildlife?
Certainly, that's an aspect we didn't hit specifically. It's kind of implied as we talk about creeks meaning the environment as a whole. But if you feel that that's something we need to kind of bring out and highlight more, that's certainly something we can include.
Something to think about, or just go with the first one like it is.
Okay. How do people feel about that last sentence on the second one? Kind of fostering connections between people and the places they cherish. Does that bring in a new feeling or a wider, broader view?
This is gonna be in the face of the parks plan, is that correct?
It'll be a concept within the park plan. It's kind of, we envision it as replacing the green necklace and looking at it as a holistic system of connectivity versus just central Issaquah, which I believe the green necklace was kind of formulated around. But we really feel that that should be expanded now to the whole city and bring all these neighborhoods together, connect all these areas and open spaces through either through multimodal paths, through trails, through sidewalks, and certainly through our parks. So there's both a physical connection and a social connection to it.
I like the first one better, but I think you could clean it up a little bit to add what Jamie was suggesting, a connected system of parks, and then take some wording from your last sentence there, indicating that, it's connecting your Issaquah communities together, something along those lines. You have to wordsmith it a little bit.
Yeah.
Jamie, do you have another comment?
Yeah, just a quick comment on that, the last sentence there. One thing, and I'm not sure if it's intended, but that almost seems like it would imply programs that go behind fostering connections. And I don't know, I think this plan is more about like physical parks. So I don't know if that's intended, but that's what I start to think when I'm fostering connections. I think of programs that are helping to foster those connections versus parks. So that might just be something to, whether that's intended or not, the direction we take it could have some implications for what.
Yeah, and that kind of alludes to one of our core goals of vibrancy. We realize that in the park system or in urban context, urban plazas, you are still fostering those connections as well throughout the park, but they're more social connections or athletic fields or, when the playgrounds. Those are the type of vibrancy pieces we're talking about, as well as cultural and artistic pieces too. So we didn't want to physical, but we want to hit the social aspect too. So maybe that's a recrafting of that last sentence to bring that out a little bit more too.
Jeff Collin?
Yes, Tom Anderson here. I don't know, I don't have the words right on the tip of my tongue to say, but I'd like to factor in some aspect of sustainability into the expression, something along the lines of, well, for the sustainability, like if we put it at the end of the first option there, for the sustainability of life in our community, something general that would include all forms of life. And also point to our sustainability goal that couples into climate change. And all, I know we're not explicitly talking about climate change, but it is part of the climate change story. So sustainability, I think, would be a good word to leverage in there in some manner.
Okay, no, that's great.
I just want to say, I agree with Tom. I was thinking the same thing to say it. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you. All right, Robin, back to you.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through what we have so far for our draft chapters. Chapter 1 will be the introduction. And what I did is I highlighted in green the areas where we do want to focus on sustainability, the environment, and how it's going to be integrated into the system. For Chapter 1, running through that bullet list, down to park system development. And this is something that Julie and I are really going to focus on and really work on, is making sure that our best management practices, sustainability practices are integrated in holistically with the park system, both, in the parks and the design, in our open spaces with our preservation and protection. And then in the trail system also, hitting up on that multimodal and walkability throughout the system. Opportunities and challenges, like Jeff keeps saying, we are a land constrained city right now, so it's going to be difficult to find large tracts of land where we can, continue that preservation, which we will do as much as we can. But also, to be able to balance that with the recreation side. Chapter 2, we're looking at public engagement, and Julie and I are working on sort of a standard process as we do public engagement. So we are hearing both sides, both the vibrancy and the resiliency point of any kind of project. Staff and city leadership engagement, one thing that we've been really proactive about, and I should say other departments have been proactive about, is talking to parks, communicating between projects, and making sure we're integrated to the best possibility we can. Moving through system analysis, looking down at condition of our parks and investment in our parks. Again, making sure we have that balance, looking at sustainability through different lenses and seeing where we can incorporate it, what's feasible, what's responsible, what's implementable. Our equity priority analysis, definitely making sure that any disadvantaged neighborhoods or areas have the ability to access parks and open space just through walking. Trust for Public Land and NRPA definitely promotes the 10-minute walk, where everybody should live within a 10-minute walk of a trail or a park. So you'll see that analysis in the plan as well. Next slide, please. Then moving into chapter 3, plan framework, we'll be looking at the plan vision, of course, through the lens of sustainability and the environment. Our concept that we just talked about, from creeks to peaks, making sure we integrate your comments and ideas into that, and looking at our plan values, goals, and strategies. And I believe in February, was it, we had a joint meeting with the park board to look at our values and goals, look at our draft element, and make sure we're integrating our sustainability goals into, I think it was mainly in the planning and design element. But overall, just making sure we're thinking about that through every project and bringing that lens and integrating as much as we can. Chapter 4, implementation, capital improvement projects. Again, making sure we have that balance of projects between vibrancy and resiliency. So we're bringing both active recreation pieces in, but we're also at the same time looking for more projects and more parcels where we can perform preservation or protection. Looking at partnerships, who can we partner with to emphasize that? Operation, are we doing our operations sustainably? Are we integrating best management practices and new forms of equipment in as much as possible? Next slide. And I want to go back to one of the slides we brought up previous meeting, that during planning and design, we will definitely be seeking principles that will seek that balance of vibrancy and resiliency through promoting multimodal connectivity, multifunctional amenities, climate change adaptation in the design, low impact development, green infrastructure. I was actually talking to Alan Quinn earlier this week about green infrastructure in the parks, and water conservation. You know, it feels like with the rain we had this week, we don't need to be worried about it, but we are realizing that drought conditions are coming. So planning for that, planning ahead for that, I think is really important. Setting up standards and starting to implement pilot projects to test out drought tolerant plants or native plant systems, I think is very beneficial to do that earlier versus later. Next slide. And just to recap where we are, so from May, the park plan actually started back in May in 2023. In September, we reviewed and had refinement of our park classifications. October, we went through our review of goals and policies. In March, we did another community workshop, draft system plan update with focus group at the end of April. And now we're kind of in the recommendations of the draft system. We'll be moving forward with the park board and Surfaces Safety and Parks Committee with the draft. So that should be coming out later this month, I believe. And we're hoping to get to City Council adoption by the end of July or early August. So I know that's a lot in a little amount of time, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer anything or go back through creeks to peaks or anything else you want to talk about for the park plan.
Damien?
Hi, Robin. One question I had for you. I know it was mentioned in kind of I think your very first slide, you had tree canopy. I don't see that mentioned later on. I'm just curious, is that something, are there going to be goals of kind of net gains on tree canopy that this plan will have? Because I know there's always going to be that tension between a big open sports field that has no tree canopy versus open space that is tree canopy. So I'm curious if that's something that's you're planning to cover, kind of how, like, are there actual measures of that balance that you plan to track in and on an ongoing basis apply to how you guys prioritize projects and development plans.
Yeah, certainly, like you said, that's going to be a balance, and it's very, very site specific on that one. You know, that's definitely a goal that Dan and I have been talking about a lot, and we're gonna look at the result of the urban forestry management plan and start integrating as much of that as possible. But again, that goes back to really good design, very sustainable design, and working in that green infrastructure as much as possible. So yeah, we won't have distinct canopy goals, but we will be working with Dan really closely on that and trying to maximize that as much as possible on the site.
Tom, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. Tom Anderson here again. I'm wondering about multimodal connectivity and how the interplay between this plan and the people who would actually implement some of these things in public works or however that's managed. So here's a parks plan, and you could talk about multimodal connectivity within the park. How does that connect up with multimodal projects that are on streets?
Oh, definitely. I absolutely see that as part of the system holistically, if you're looking at the park system. But I have to say that's something that Public Works has really stepped up lately. And they're bringing us into their conceptual design early on. And we're talking to them more and more about how we're integrating when we have new projects or they have new projects, how we're going to start melding those together and what the beneficial pieces are, what our gaps are. And so as they're working through their projects and their CIP plans, we can start paralleling our projects together and making sure they're well integrated. So we're definitely striving for that more and more.
Thank you.
And it's really exciting to see all the departments talking together and all these plans starting to meld.
Thank you.
Last comments? That's all we got, Robin. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye. Have a good night.
Tippin. All right, next up, we're going to hear an update from a couple of our students on work related to the Issaquah Climate Action Plan from the 23-24 school year. And we have Zoe Deering and Sienna Gold here to talk to us. Did I get your last name right, Sienna?
Yes.
Do a quick introduction. I think you guys are going to talk about where you're at school, but both of them have been interning through Gibson High School's internship program. They're also both involved in sustainability ambassadors. You all have the chance to hear from them about the school district policy, but they've been doing a ton of other work for the city on the side. So we just wanted to highlight a few of those projects, and there'll be some that are continuing on next year.
Okay, so yeah, this was just our overview of what we're going to be kind of talking about, touching on the city of Issaquah work and also some stuff with sustainability ambassadors. So yeah, Stacy kind of explained some of this, but Gibson, some of you might be familiar, is a big picture school. A big part of that is learning through internship, and so that's how we're able to be at City Hall working with Stacy on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we join a call with Peter Donaldson from Sustainability Ambassadors on Thursdays and Monday nights to work with him. And it's project-based learning, so that's what we've been kind of working on.
You guys mind taking a step that way?
Yeah, sorry.
The camera is right behind you. So thanks.
These are just the projects for the city of Issaquah that I'm going to go over, and some things that are within. So the sustainability fair, this was kind of a big part of our internship so far this year, expanding upon what Nina had done and the rest of the sustainability team last year. So we started off by requesting sponsorship from local businesses, other companies in the area, and we went in person to just talk to them about what the sustainability fair is, and we emailed some people. that was a cool experience. And then the other kind of things related to that, the picture on the bottom left there is some kids' passport activities that were adapted from a template that Mina did last year. But me and Zoe kind of had the idea to rework it to fit within the sections of the climate action plan. So there's little challenges for kids to do around sustainability fair within each of those categories. And then the two kind of day of the fair things that I was working on were a clothing swap with volunteers from Issaquah Interact, which is the teen like Rotary group that I'm co-president of this year. And so they were really excited to help put that on, and I'll have some metrics about that on the next slide. And then the other thing was Mina and I were able to work with Carrie Ziegler, who's in that photo there, which is a local artist who does sustainability related art. And we designed an activity for kids, community members at the fair to contribute to. This was our final product over there. And it was displayed at the Salmon Hatchery's Fish Fry release event, and it is also going to be at the Fall City Library in 2 days, so that's exciting. And yeah, next slide has some stuff about that. We were able to get a little over $1,000 in sponsorships. The clothing swap had 480 items brought, 225 swaps, and 255 donated through Ridwell to be reused. And then we had about 50 fish painted. That's as many as we made. So people were engaged, and commitment cards filled out. I forgot to mention that within each of those things, kids would write, I commit to, and then an action that was sustainability focused related. We had a little list of ideas, just like use a reusable water bottle, learn about wildlife in your area, that sort of thing. And then more commitment cards will be filled out at the library events. That'll be exciting. The climate challenge, this was another big project this year. It was a 4-week challenge that was adapted from a 6-week challenge in a California school. And the outline of that was a baseline survey that was sent out on Monday to collect some data, get people thinking about the theme of the week. And then having a week to log actions on the Eastside Climate Challenge website, and a call to action event or something on the Friday. So the purpose of this was just to get students involved, engaged, interested with climate action through that website, but also just in general, getting to think about some of those actions they can start taking. Those were the themes of the weeks. Here were some photos from our call to action events. Our first call to action event and last call to action event were like all school things. So our first one was a turn off the lights day. All of our schools lights were turned off for the day to save energy, get people talking about the challenge. And then we had an adopt a drain event where students came out to the parking lot, cleaned up storm drains, learned about stormwater runoff, how all that sort of stuff works, and then also signed up to adopt a drain in their neighborhood, and they could win prizes from this, which they got car wash tickets if they signed up to do one in their neighborhood. There was donut holes, fun stuff. And then the other kind of event that we had was a composting and like organic food kind of event type thing. So Mina helped a lot with this. We kind of walked around Gibson, talked about how composting works there. And then Mina shared some of her plans and projects in the future around composting and improving that system, and how that connects to our garden at Gibson, because we've got a pretty cool garden that grows a lot of food. And we talked about some little pop quiz stuff about organic food, and yeah, it was very fun. And then metrics for that, we had 17 students sign up, which was not as much as we had liked, but our school is pretty small. It's less than 200 kids, so not as bad. 6 actions completed on the website, and 23 more actions were started on the website. And then I did a little write-up about that challenge, some things to improve on. People seem to really be engaged with the hands-on activities, less of the independent logging actions on the website, which was expected. But if I were to do that again, I'll definitely include more of that sort of stuff. And then just more promotion. Not everyone knew that it was something going on, so making sure people were aware of it. And then another part of this was I reached out to about 15 clubs in the area that were sustainability, climate related, to see if they were interested in running a challenge like this. And 2 clubs from Skyline are collaborating right now to run it. I haven't gotten updates on how that is going yet, so hopefully, well, it actually might have just ended, but hopefully some other people will kind of adapt it in the future. And then our last project for City of Issaquah stuff was ICAP one-pager reports. These are our 3 finished ones so far, which were about heat pumps, green buildings, and community resilience. And this is just kind of a summary report to hopefully be included in the council update and for people to read. We also started some on the other kind of areas, but these were our finished ones.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the relationship between the city and sustainability ambassadors. So the SNAP program, Sustainable Neighborhoods Ambassadors Program, started, it was like last June that it officially started. But I have been working as a paid intern for overtime, and then also as UNCNF or academic interns. So those are all volunteer hours. And then 2 other students from IHS have also, one has been with the program since it started, and the other one just joined. But basically, we are able to work even more on advancing the City of Issaquah's climate action plan, and doing a lot of promotional work, but also a lot of content marketing strategies, and working with a lot of different coaches from around the area. So not only getting David and Stacy's wonderful feedback, but also getting some other perspectives from different areas around King County and beyond. So the first thing that I kind of did in relation to the city that sustainability ambassadors really inspired me to do was figure out the Adopt a Dream program here. So I worked with Mike B quite a bit at Public Works to get that program reinstated here in Issaquah. So it is officially something you can do. Highly encourage everyone to sign up if you haven't already. But it's a really cool program, and really engages a lot of people because it's really easy. And so I've been working with them when it comes to how do we interact with the public and how do we talk more about this and get people excited to participate. And then biking and transportation, bike rodeo. So the bike rodeo was something we really wanted to happen, but it probably never will. And that's just due to the nature of kids falling off bikes being kind of an insurance and legal issue, and insurance is expensive, and nobody wants to pay money, right? Having free events is obviously preferred. So we reached out to Clark Elementary. They basically said, nuh-uh. They immediately shut us down, which I was a little disappointed about. And then we reached out to Issaquah Valley Elementary, and they were much nicer about it. They basically just said that they don't have the bandwidth for it, and they couldn't really pay for the insurance, so that's something that we would have to handle. So our hope is that because we got a lot of the details for all of that figured out, that we can maybe in the future.
What is a bike rodeo?
Bike rodeo is you get a bunch of kids get on their little bikes and learn about bike safety. So, you know, how to safely ride a bike, how to, you know, ride a bike in obviously not real traffic, because we don't want anybody getting hurt, but just kind of like overall bike safety things. So making sure your helmet fits properly, that your bike even fits you, and other things like that. There's just a lot of fun activities for kids to do. And the other thing that we're really hoping we can pull off, because it's like, it's not the adult version of a bike rodeo, but kind of is Town Hall on Bikes. Town Hall on Bikes is basically a private media event that Sustainability Ambassadors has successfully hosted in Juanita, in Kirkland?
Yes.
Okay. In Kirkland. So they had a bunch of city representatives, public representatives, and a bunch of students ride their bikes throughout the city, looking at bike infrastructure, future plans for bike infrastructure, and just kind of like other sustainability related things. And taking a look at success stories. And it's kind of more a closed off media event. So the insurance is a little bit easier to manage, because you can kind of be like, okay, all these people are expected to go, instead of it just being like, I don't know how many kids will show up. So we're hoping that we can work with the transportation department over the summer and get that something that can happen next fall. And if any of you guys want to join, we'd be happy to have you guys. You guys are some, what was communications for again? Even similar stuff, but. Yes. So we also started making newsletters. They haven't been super city related. I mean, more city engaged. They're very city related. And those are just basically monthly newsletters that we put out. We just this past month for May started using a CRM. So it's a little bit more official. If you guys want to sign up, just let me know. And I will write your email address down, and you will get, I will send you guys the May newsletter. And then you guys will get the June newsletter when that comes out. But yeah, it's been kind of rough because it's kind of a trial and error a little bit. But it's been a lot of fun. And the part you guys have been waiting for, ISD policy. We just spoke with Jason Morse. Yes. They all have very similar names. We spoke with him yesterday.
Nope, yep, yesterday.
It was yesterday. Okay.
No.
Yesterday morning, we spoke with him and a couple other people, and they're really excited on just working with us to get student voices out there. And especially when it comes to making like a public facing website. So highlighting what the district already does, because the district does a lot. They just don't tell anybody, which kind of sucks, because you're like, well, if you're doing all these things, why aren't you bragging about it? They're like, it would make us money if we bragged about it more too. So yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer, but we're having to help them with that. But it's gonna look great whenever it gets published. It might get published next fall, maybe. Maybe later than that, but I don't know. They're very busy. And then the other thing is that we will be meeting with the school board on August 27th during their board retreat to talk further about establishing policy and just kind of moving forward with what that stuff will look like. So yeah, it's going. They are pretty not excited, but they
Interested.
They invited us to a board retreat so we can talk face to face with them and have conversations, which is a step up from public comment. So yeah, pretty excited about that. Yeah.
Thank you, you guys. That's
Yeah.
doing a lot. That's a lot of work. I think you'll have a few takers from this group for your bike event, so keep us informed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw on the chat there, somebody put in that Bellevue has a bike rodeo at Robbinsville School, so you might want to reach out to them.
Yeah, there has been some successful events. I think just strategy wise, we're not exactly sure what the best way to go about all of the tiny details that we also don't have a ton of control over sometimes. So, yeah.
Bonnie, or sorry, Ann, did you have something here?
Yeah, so do you know about the Cascade Bicycle Club?
So we had saved, I had bookmarked their bike rodeo, like how to host a bike rodeo page. And then I came back to it a couple weeks later and it was taken down. So they got rid of the page.
We were initially planning on using their kind of resources. They had a kit that they would like rent to us. So that was something we were looking into. I don't think that exists anymore, but it could be something to ask further
Maybe
questions.
just reach out to them.
Yeah.
And maybe they could collaborate with you and help out with the insurance and stuff, because they might have insurance.
Okay.
And just a thought.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and when you talk about the policy, you're talking about the sustainability policy.
Yes.
Like a climate action plan type of a thing.
Yes, so the strategy for that, we're currently looking at a sustainable policy, then a action plan. So having more like specific actions and what that, the policy kind of just like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this eventually. But the action plan is when the actual things are pointed out, and then finally an implementation plan with an implementation board or committee of some kind that actually makes sure those things are happening. It's a lot, and probably Vinciana will be long gone and out of the school district by the time that comes around. But our hope is that we can start getting some underclassmen excited about these things too.
Absolutely. Way to go.
Raj, do you have a comment?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Dawn. Hi, this is Praj. So I think this is great what you guys are doing. This is really a lot of stuff, and this is a really good start. Some of the questions, I know some of the activities you mentioned were specifically done at your school, and then you are trying to collaborate with other schools. I think you said you reached out to another 15 clubs or something like that. One of the questions I had was, as sustainability ambassadors, means your meetings for the sustainability ambassadors program, is it just restricted to your group which falls under sustainability ambassadors, or are different schools in Issaquah school district involved in those meetings, and are you planning some events or activities with them as well?
Yeah, so what sustainability ambassadors is consisted of, I think we're closer to around 60 students now. But we basically meet all hands every Monday night, and then any other further more individual team meetings have to happen outside of that timeline. Usually we'll meet for about 15 minutes during all hands and a little breakout room. But other than that, it's kind of up to the students to kind of empower themselves and start going out and actually planning things with other teams. So we group it by city teams. So Issaquah School District is a little bit different because they have many different cities that kind of meet the whole school district. So we work a lot with the Sammamish team, and we've also learned a lot of things from the Bellevue team, and a lot of our transportation projects have been practiced in the Kirkland and I believe Redmond teams. So
yeah, and just to add on to that, it's kind of a confusing relationship, but the sustainability ambassadors all hands meetings are multi-city and stuff, but our Thursday internship specific meetings are me and Zoe and Peter, who is the director of that, and it's just focused more on what we've been doing in Issaquah, but we have, adapted and collaborated with other city teams through that other meeting.
And another question was, so working with the ISD, are you planning to work with different schools or green teams in ISD as well, or it's not in, there is no conversation about that yet, at least?
Likely not yet, just due to the nature of how slow things are at a policy, kind of that whole level of things. When it comes to action plans and actually implementing those action plans, a lot of them will probably end up landing on the actual green teams and how can we engage with those green teams to not just put all the work on them, because it's also on the school district itself, but how can we collaborate with them to make sure everything's going great and the most efficient as possible. So.
Okay, thank you.
One last comment by Jonathan.
I just wanted to say, I think this is great. Everything you've done is wonderful. I know you're going to move on to your next chapter of your life, but I think you should sustain this work into the future as you move off to your next phase of life. This sustainability work that you're doing is for you and other generations your age. So as you go to college or you go to work or later in life, continue this great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Easy.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's been a great year working with you. I wanted to just note in the memo, I flagged that we had another student from outside high school that's working on city policy for carbon offset for employee travel. She's still finalizing her report, but we'll just share that as an FYI in the future. So we've been really lucky to have some great students to work with this year. And I'll send a number of follow-up links to the group after this meeting.
Great job, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, next up, we're going to hear from a couple graduate student consultants from Evans School of Public Policy regarding tree canopy. David, do you want to?
Yeah. Wonderful. And I'll do a very quick preface because I know they're going to introduce themselves. But just to start us off, myself and Dan have been working with graduate students from the UW Evans School of Public Policy for the past 5.5 months at this point, specifically looking at one of our actions in the Climate Action Plan. So they've done fantastic work over the last 5 months. They graduated yesterday, so they're here after graduation. And they're going to be telling us all about all of their work and their recommendations for the city to consider.
Should we do it here?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so we are some of the Evans student consulting groups. I'm Sydney Romero.
I'm Alex Oskin.
I'm Anthony Metellus.
And Caitlin Barrera, who contributed a lot to this project, as well as unfortunately not able to be here because she is on a 2 to 3 week vacation. So unfortunate. But we will be going over carbon and canopy, expanded tree canopy on Issaquah's privately held land. And so just a brief outline of our presentation. We're going to start with some introduction about what we're going to be doing here, or what we did. Some background to the project, our methodologies, our key findings. There were a lot, so we'll try to condense it. And some recommendations and considerations, next steps, and then a Q&A if time allows. Being stubborn. So to get this project started, the city of Issaquah, or rather probably David, sent a project request to the UW Evans Consulting Lab. And for reference, for those who are not from the area, Evans is UW's public policy school. We began our work in January of this past year, just finished up a week ago. And specifically that project requested assistance to identify ways to expand tree canopy on private land.
Right, and so for a bit more project background, as everyone in this room is aware, the Issaquah Climate Action Plan was passed in 2021. And this report looks to identify and outline the key strategies, metrics, and targets that the city can follow in order to reach and achieve equity and environmental goals. And within this report, we have Natural Systems Action 1.2. And this looks to incentivize expanding local carbon sequestration on private land. And it looks to do so by leveraging its relationships with regional nonprofits and also property owners in order to support tree planting and tree health. And so our project adds to Natural System 1.2 by looking at the ways in which we can incentivize this. And to do so, we have our primary research question, which looks at the ways, which asks us what policy options should the city consider in order to support and encourage tree canopy expansion on private land. And in order to do so, we used a suite of research methods, and we're going to give you a brief overview before going into them further and explaining our sub-questions. So for the first one, we have the Urban Forestry Management Plan survey, which was launched in late March and lasted until early April. And then we also did interviews with residential and commercial property owners, along with interviews with peer jurisdictions and local nonprofits. From there, we did a review of the tree planting programs from these peer jurisdictions, program evaluations, and then finally rounded it all out with a geospatial analysis. So for our first sub-question, we really looked at the community. First two sub-questions, sorry. We looked at the community and their perspectives. We used the Urban Forestry Management Survey and also our interviews with our commercial and residential property owners to look at the supports that community members find most helpful to their property, and also to explore the concerns and barriers that are present there. Our next two questions have to do more with what our peers experienced, peer jurisdictions have experienced, and their perspectives. So we employed our interviews with peer jurisdictions, as well as program evaluations and the program reviews. So this looked at the challenges and opportunities that they faced and the impacts of exemplary executed programs. And just as a note, we were able to connect with 6 of our peers and 2 commercial property owners for this. And finally, we used current climate models to look at the contingency plans that should be done by the city. Not only were the climate models looking at current conditions and past conditions, but they also looked towards the future, as well as looking at sociodemographics and economics. Finally, here we have a list of our limitations. They're pretty wide and range in terms of the limitations that they provided. And they're mostly around time and the availability of data publicly.
Thanks, Anthony. And I'll get into key findings, but before we want to do that, just wanted to give a brief overview of the types of tree planting programs that we reviewed. So you see there are tree giveaway programs, and those are programs that provide the public with free trees and or materials, so things like tree sticks or mulch. A tree coupon program, which provides participants with a coupon that covers some or all of the upfront costs of trees redeemable at participating nurseries. The tree rebate program, which is similar to a tree coupon program, but reimburses the public after trees are purchased. So the main difference is the participant would have to cover the upfront costs themselves. And we also looked at one program that conducted a discounted tree sale where they sold trees at a discounted price to the public. And just want to note that it was outside of our scope to cover programs that provide direct payments to property owners that plant and maintain trees. Though we do have some examples in our report that you can get some more information on. And so, like Anthony had shared, we structured our analysis and our findings around these secondary questions. And this first one was just what concerns or barriers prevent private property owners from expanding tree canopy? And through the UFMP survey, we found that 47% of survey respondents reported that they had insufficient knowledge about which trees to plant, where to plant them, or how to maintain them. And that was what prevented them from planting trees on their property. And this was also shared by the residential property owner interviews, who also shared that the burden of tree maintenance, so just what it takes to maintain trees on their property, or insufficient space, literally not having enough room to plant additional trees, or barriers to planting trees on their property. When we look at the inverse of that question, what resources or supports would community members find most helpful? We found a similar finding that 79% of survey respondents said that personalized advice on which trees to plant, where to plant them, or how to maintain them would increase their interest in planting trees on their property. And we also saw moderate support for programs that would discount or subsidize the cost of trees, such as the tree giveaway program, 59%, and tree rebate program with 46%. And once again, when we look to our residential property owner interviews, we found similar findings. 4 out of the 6 residents that we interviewed said that they would be willing to plant trees. They had some more educational resources, things on maintenance expectations, siting resources, where to plant the tree on their property, or if they received discounted saplings. And then we also asked residential property owners to reflect on what they most valued about trees on the property. And the most often cited factors were the aesthetics that trees provide, followed by privacy, ecological benefits, including carbon sequestration, and the tree's ability to purify air, as well as shade that they provide. And when we look to our peer jurisdictions and nonprofits, we asked, what challenges or opportunities that they see in tree planting programs that they had implemented. And the key opportunity that many programs highlighted was incorporating equity into tree planting programs. And so there are a number of different ways that these programs did this. Some conducted kind of their own equity analysis of their jurisdictions beforehand to understand what neighborhoods or census blocks had lower urban tree canopy or that experienced disproportionate environmental impacts, and then prioritize outreach to those neighborhoods or prioritize applications from those neighborhoods in their tree planting programs. Some focused on translating their materials to make sure that any resources were more accessible to all their community members. But one through line was all these programs encourage anyone conducting a tree planting program to incorporate equity from the design and the implementation, as they found it really difficult to retrofit an existing program to be more equitable afterwards. And we also saw that these tree planting programs all had partnerships with mission-aligned nonprofits or funding organizations. The partnerships varied in scale and scope, and some partnerships provide quite a bit of funding for a tree giveaway program or help deliver trees. Smaller scale partnerships looked at kind of providing outreach or providing additional information to the potential participants. And we also saw a variety of ways that peer jurisdictions educated and provide resources to the participants or to the public. So many had online resources. We also saw some online training courses that participants could take, as well as in-person and virtual tree planting and maintenance workshops. Some programs did require a participant to attend a virtual workshop or an in-person workshop before receiving their tree, though not all of them did. And then through the peer jurisdiction interviews, one finding we want to highlight was long-term tree mortality and survivability rates were important indicators of success, particularly important for the city of Issaquah as you think about planting trees as a way to sequester carbon. And so these jurisdictions could track how many trees they give away or how many people participate in a tree coupon program, but it was hard for them to understand whether those trees survived 5-10 years into the future. And that kind of seemed to be a gap from a lot of the programs that we looked at. Then we also looked at program evaluations for these tree planting programs where they're available. Like Anthony had shared, one limitation was there wasn't a lot of publicly available data, but we did look at program evaluations from Seattle Public Utilities Trees for Neighborhoods program, which is a tree giveaway program, as well as Tacoma's tree coupon program. And just saw the many ways that they looked and understood, looked to measure and understand the impact of their programs. So they looked at tree planting outcomes, tree maintenance outcomes. They'd ask questions on whether or not participants learned something new or felt confident in their ability to maintain trees on their property, as well as some process evaluation type questions to understand participant satisfaction or how you could improve the program in the future. And again, here, one thing we wanted to call out was these 2 programs that we looked at were programs that had identified priority neighborhoods and prioritized them in their outreach or their applications. And ultimately, they saw that those identified neighborhoods contributed between 40 to 52% of their program's total participation, suggesting that those efforts did, in that could pay off. And then lastly, when we looked at our different climate models, we learned that in the Pacific Northwest, both temperature and precipitation are projected to increase in the region. And tree hardiness zones will stay between zone 8 and 9 until 2039, at which point it will shift completely to zone 9. And using that information, we created, Anthony really created this climate adapted species list as a good starting point to of trees that could be used in any potential tree planting program, which we'll get to in our recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So just a heads up, this was Caitlin's domain with these presentations. So please bear with me if I say something wrong or misspoke. Graduated yesterday, so been a little busy. So our recommendations, we have first 4 recommendations, and we also have a set of 4 considerations that aren't listed here. And we recommend the city to consider and weigh the pros and cons of each to build its own policy menu of items they think it will work best within the limits. So the recommendations we have a giveaway program, a tree coupon program, which is not a preferred option, but it is great if resources are limited. A monitoring program in addition to a selected tree program. It works with any of the recommendations. And we also recommend a tree installation and maintenance workshop to boost the educational resources that a lot of the residents have indicated that they'd like. So the first program, to go a bit more in depth, is a tree giveaway program. This was the recommendation that was most supported by Issaquah residents throughout interviews and in survey results. We also spoke with King and Pierce counties, who both said they had success with this program. However, without a monitoring component, there's no way to measure if the tree giveaways will help the city reach its ICAP goal of 55% covered by 2035. So do keep in mind that as we progress to recommendation 3, this should pair very nicely with it. Even though it's the most equitable option for low-income community members, since it is free, it still has some barriers. If Issaquah uses an application to distribute trees, it can portray or inhibit equitable growth because it can have language barriers or utilize time and resources that some people do not have to go through an application. Additionally, we noticed that some applications have if they don't have a prioritization feature where more vulnerable communities might not be as recognized, it is important to have a prioritization so that embedded in reviewing applications so that low-income applicants will be better prioritized over folks who are able to afford trees or saplings. And finally, it requires staff to acquire, store, and distribute materials. So just keep that in mind as it begins to, if you choose to implement it. Our second recommendation is implementing a tree coupon program. This is much better for when resources are limited because it is less expensive than the giveaway program. However, it's still a great program if the first option is not available to Issaquah. One large strength of this program is that the city can choose how they want the cost to be distributed. They could make it completely free to participants or at a discounted rate. And so that discounted rate is essentially like a slider option of which Issaquah can choose what they're able to allocate to the coupon program. But some of the weaknesses include an application process similarly to what I described before, especially because it requires distribution of coupons to participants. You do need to think about how to run that application process, how to build it, and who's going to be reviewing those applications. This program also has nurseries distribute their trees at a place of business in exchange for the coupon given by the participant, since it isn't implemented directly by Issaquah. They don't need to manage the trees themselves in order to store and distribute that, but you do need to coordinate with some nurseries and build some trust and cooperation there. And there's also no monitoring component in this program's design as well, which is why for recommendation 3, we recommend implementing a monitoring program. In a number of the programs that we've been reviewing, they have a separate monitoring program that seems to be more successful than just not having it all together. Mostly that you're able to track the program success in increasing carbon canopy or canopy cover. If there's not a lot of success with it, we know how to build and move forward. A lot of our findings have indicated that many tree species don't have a return of interest for carbon capture until 5 to 10 years after installation, meaning trees need to be fully mature in order to provide those benefits. So if we're planting trees, but the trees aren't successfully planted, they die, it's a waste. So we want to make sure that we're monitoring those resources so that you're able to get the benefit of having mature trees and increased carbon canopy. But there needs to be a bit of trust built between the city and residents in order to create that, especially if it's going to be monitored on private land. There aren't a lot of monitoring programs that are really, most programs don't require monitoring for the participants. Usually it is self-reporting on a survey, and that survey may include photo documentation. Only one of the programs we monitored or we reviewed had field visits. And none evaluated had site visits on private lands. So if the city is able to, and they do have the resources to do that, they would be the first to consider an on-site implementation. However, that requires a lot of staff time. And so kind of thinking about ways to make that possible while maximizing support for residents is going to be something just to think about as you start to develop a monitoring program. There might be one. Oh, another great benefit to monitoring program is specifically for Issaquah is understanding the performance of tree species types. Anthony did prepare that tree species list. That should be a good starting point for Issaquah to consider some saplings that they might include in a giveaway or to promote in a coupon program. But knowing what trees are doing well and is not doing well is going to be great information to have in further investing in trees in those programs, as well as gaining longitudinal data of what participants require for maintenance of those trees. And so our last recommendation is to facilitate tree installation and maintenance workshops, either remotely or in person, to better educate residents on how to plant and maintain trees on their own property. Peer jurisdictions, nonprofits, residents, and survey respondents all said they wanted education and training. And so I think this is kind of a win-win to implement. It should be a bit lower budget, and I imagine that a number of folks already on your team are able to provide this knowledge or have that easily accessible. 79% of UMFP survey respondents said that specifically personalized advice would increase their interest in planting trees. So that could be as an as needed basis in these workshops. If folks wanted to come up and ask those questions, just providing it so that it's an accessible resources for residents should be able to increase the amount of trees planted each year. Online tutorials, if they do decide to do a virtual workshop, because being in person is not always accessible for everyone, especially given commuting times. The online tutorials can be paired with quizzes or interactive Zoom sessions so that the person conducting the training is able to interact with participants and really explore what they're learning, what they're not learning from in those education sessions. However, and also some cities like City of Tacoma also uses the workshops and online materials to educate residents on city code, like knowing where to not plant. And so that pairs again with making sure that not only is it successful, but it is within city code, which can be very confusing. And two of the weaknesses we found with these programs is that require staff time and resources to build materials. However, we really do encourage that if the city is not able to lead these programs by themselves, there's a lot of nonprofits who are already engaged in this work who would be likely happy to collaborate on efforts to teach residents, since that is a match in missions of Issaquah wanting to increase their carbon canopy and a lot of these nonprofits wanting to increase the health of the Pacific Northwest and its biodiversity. So for example, like KCD, King Conservation District is a great one. We'll mention it a little bit. And then I think the next slide, please. So just key takeaways again. Reduced price or free materials is a huge incentive for participants to join in. However, there is a large cost associated with both installation and maintenance. That can be a disincentive to folks. So making sure to pair that with education is essential in order to actually be able to tap into those incentives and make the program successful. We also recommend that if, as tree types are chosen, having a menu or variety for folks to choose from rather than just giving them one tree will make them more likely to actually be interested in planting the tree. As long as it is climate adaptable and suitable for the Issaquah area. And I think that's all that I will consider. There's a lot more to discuss, but I think that's good.
Great, thanks, Amy. So along with our recommendations, we have program considerations. And while we believe that this will pair perfectly with our recommendations, these program considerations can also be useful to use in other city programming. So the first one would be to further refine and incorporate the tree adapted species list, or the adapted tree species list. And the benefit for this is that not only will it be useful for the ICAP, but in general for the tree planting programs that the city would like to do through parks. The next one that we have is to leverage and create new partnerships for funding and implementation support. And these partnerships can be within peer jurisdictions or for nonprofits. So the peer jurisdictions would be beneficial in that we can learn from their experiences and really partner up with them. And for nonprofits, connecting with them will allow us to get a greater leverage with the community because nonprofits tend to have more community trust than government entities. Next, we believe a great program consideration would be to prioritize equity in outreach, tree distribution, and support resources. So prioritizing equity looks like mapping areas and zones in which Issaquah could use more tree canopy and in areas in which are not being engaged as of now. Support resources can be online, in person, or through training series. And along with this consideration goes community engagement and adaptive management. And then our final consideration would be to expand tree planting resources and online materials. So those last three considerations really look towards the community and how the city can engage them and really connect with them in order to support the climate action goals.
And so some of the next step for Issaquah is, as I mentioned earlier, to select and prioritize recommendations that make sense within their budget and within their scope, as well as incorporating some of the program considerations as needed. And for further research, we recommend that the Issaquah consider engaging more with KCD, the landowner incentive program specifically, as it provides owners with cost share assistance that supports conservation practices on private property. And there is a number of residents that shared that they utilize the KCD program to do some ecological restoration on their own land. And so I imagine that there's a lot of opportunities there to encourage residents or HOAs to reach out to KCD or Issaquah itself. Also, further considering commercial private property owner perspectives, we had a very limited pool of commercial private property owners to interact with because many of them are busy and we had a very short project scope or project timeline. And just continuing to think about how to get more feedback from diverse community members, such as low-income property owners, other vulnerable populations, and renters especially. And also exploring more about how to maintain, not necessarily expand, but just maintain the existing tree canopy that Issaquah has. So thanks to everyone who has contributed, especially David and Dan, but Stacy as well have all given us wonderful feedback on our rather comprehensive and extensive paper, which was about 90 something pages, so very scary. And of course, everyone else involved. And so thank you all. Dan was not able to make the photo with us, so I had to throw his little head in. I don't know if I got the height right. He might tower above us, but yeah, it just looks more natural to have him there. So yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
One more slide. Yeah.
And so our question is, does the environmental board have any feedback for staff to consider as they move forward reviewing our proposed recommendations?
Yes, thank you very much. Lori, first.
Yeah, I have a question. How much focus or like what focus does the program have on like native tree canopy and like native plants versus invasive and non-native?
Well, so I can take this.
Okay.
So it was interesting when we looked at different peer jurisdictions and how they were implementing their tree planting programs, because they had different ways of doing it. So I know City of Kirkland, they had a tree rebate program, and they allowed like ornamental trees to be like trees that could participate as long as they grew to a certain size. Others did have more structured species lists. But I think through our research, we came up with that climate adaptive tree species list and would encourage the city to incorporate that list and refine that list. Any tree planting.
And that was native trees, correct?
On the tree planting list, there are native trees, trees that are native to the North America area, and then trees that are also non-native, like completely to North America. And the reason why we did this is due to the change in hardiness zone. So as we consider the climate and the hardiness zones that trees can thrive in the future, given that we are shifting in temperature and precipitation is increasing, we decided to kind of broaden that list up. Because as these trees may not be native now, they might be better suited in the future. That was the reasoning behind that.
Jamie, I think.
I had a question. You mentioned at the beginning that your scope was not going to take into consideration anything that involved direct payment. Did that include carbon credits or any sort of sequestration related payments or value?
Yeah, I think I can jump in on that one. So I think for the most part, the focus of this project ended up being on those tree planting programs. We did look on the staff level a little bit more on those programs that support carbon sequestration via direct payments. For the most part, what we found is that there's a certain acreage amount that those properties need to be over for participation in a lot of those programs. And unfortunately, we have very few private properties that kind of meet that. So that is something that staff will continue to look at and consider, especially if the board is interested in that. We would imagine that, or based on kind of our property sizes, that's going to kind of focus us more towards a couple handful of properties versus what this project was looking at, which was kind of a wider distribution of properties.
Yeah, because I think my worry is that, I mean, with our very, very aggressive tree canopy goals that I'm still not sure how we are going to even come close to, this does not seem near enough. That like a landowner having to fund installation costs, ongoing maintenance costs, and they're just getting a free tree. It doesn't seem like nearly enough to change the calculus for the people, the number of people that we need. So it's unfortunate. I mean, I would love if there was a market-based way that we could help incentivize this, because I think otherwise it's going to be a really hard sell for most landowners. So encourage staff to continue evaluating if there's other routes, because I just don't think free trees is unfortunately, I mean, it's going to be enough it'll be great for some landowners, but I just don't think that's going to be enough to incentivize a large portion.
It's very interesting. Can I add one thing to that? Something that we discovered in our research that I think is highly relevant to Issaquah, since Issaquah had, I don't have the numbers on me, it's somewhere in my paper, but they have their median, like the median income in Issaquah is way higher than the national average. I mean, I think it's like at least double, and a lot less diversity, and a lot more highly educated. And something that was interesting in my research when I was looking into, you know, like who participates in tree programs most frequently, it was hands down white, female, educated, and on wealthier. And so I absolutely agree with the incentives, but I think that Issaquah specifically might have a higher interest in this based off not democracy, the demographics just of the city. So that's something to kind of weigh in your favor.
And you next.
Oh, yeah, the slide that showed the species list, they were all deciduous, no conifers on there. Was that just a partial list or was that the entire list or what?
Right, the reasoning for that is because we felt that deciduous trees would be the most useful in expanding the canopy coverage overall. Yeah.
One of the other things I'll add there is, this was a great start to the list, and Dan, probably less myself because I don't have expertise in this, but Dan and our park staff and others can take that list as a starting point and build it out more. So I wouldn't call it a complete list at this point.
Okay. And also near the beginning of the presentation, you talked about a geospatial analysis. I didn't see anything in the presentation about that. Was that done? Is there something you could tell us about that?
No, thanks for asking. I'll give it to Anthony, but again, our paper was 97 pages and we're like, okay, how do we not bore them all to death while being able to talk about a recommendation? So there's a lot we haven't. So we would definitely encourage you to reflect on the paper or just zoom through the paper, but Anthony, I'll let you.
No, for sure. I was going to.
Oh, sorry.
Simply say that. Yeah. All of our map and geospatial analysis is in that.
And
I'm wondering about what the intent of the analysis is. So for example, I can envision, for example, a way to usefully get some trees planted would be to, well, hey, let's find where the parcels are that have the greatest potential for an increase in our canopy, and only 10% of the parcels are going to be in that category or less. But anyway, we can get more bang for our buck by focusing specifically on owners of parcels that have a nice, some space for trees. So is that part of what you're doing, or is this completely different sort of?
Well, David, you might know too, I know that you all had contracted with Planet Geo to do kind of a tree canopy assessment that did a lot of that geospatial analysis. So that was part of our background research that we included. So our GIS, I don't think got quite to that level of detail, although I know there was some work that the city had done.
Yeah, and there's some maps as well that have that I know Anthony worked on that highlights environmental health disparities, which is really interesting to consider as climate change, increases. Those are areas that the city should try to consider and target support because they're going to be more vulnerable as the environment changes.
For some past research, we do have some maps that talk about potential planting areas where there could be more tree canopy cover. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, Dan might, but there's a significant amount on private property, which would help drive some of this research that we could reach our goals with private property planting alone, right? And so thinking about how we're going to do that and kind of where those properties are spread across the city of Issaquah is going to kind of help us to do program development.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where I was going with it as far as recommendations. Yeah, I going around Issaquah, there are definitely parcels, privately held parcels that have a lot of potential for planting. And one of the obstacles to that is, well, they're owned by commercial developers who someday want to do something different with that land. And, I don't want to encumber my future use of this by putting trees that I'll then just have to make a big argument about why I should be allowed to take them down. So that would be one of the reasons why private landowners would not want to plant trees. And another one that occurred to me, because I'd be kind of in this boat, I wanted to put some solar panels up, but they told me, well, no, you have too many trees. It wouldn't work out for you. Okay, well, so I was going to cut them all down. So anyway, that would be another obstacle. I didn't see that in your list of reasons why a landowner might not want to do it. They might well not want to do it because it would reduce their solar. Thank you.
Jonathan, just quickly, it seemed like your presentation was mainly about residential work. When I run around Issaquah, it seems like the opportunities might be more so in the commercial properties. So I think it would be, maybe you probably have a data that might show that, I don't know. But that was, if I were to give a recommendation, I would say focus on those areas. Another just comment, I have a colleague who planted several hundred trees in the Central District about 20 years ago. through some sort of program with the city of Seattle. And I would be willing to connect him up with this group if they had any questions and lessons learned. He probably has monitored his work, so he might know what worked and what didn't work. And that's some great lessons learned.
You're great. Thank you. And I think you're right.
Great work. And I think this is a really important program. Sorry to disagree, Jamie. But yeah, I think it's how we're going to meet our goal. So I was just looking, I know that Bellevue has been giving trees away for a while, since 2021. Looks like they've given 2,000 or 3,000 trees away. I think we'd have to do more research to see if they're monitoring it, to see how well the trees are doing. But I do know somebody who's involved, so I could ask. And I love John's idea of working with commercial as well. And I think we need to try to get the word out to both commercial and residents, and maybe start just by seeing who comes forward first. Be an idea. And then as well as in-person and online workshops, I think you mentioned just having something on the website, something there so people can just go there anytime and see how to plant the tree properly. And then also, if we go back one slide from the tree planting, it says in the Pacific Northwest, both temperature and precipitation are projected to increase in the region by 2099. Extreme heat, according to NOAA, and we can feel it, has increased a lot since 1910. And it's the extreme heat, from what I can see, that is weakening a lot of the trees, especially the western red cedar right now. And there's other ones around with dead tops, and they're continuing to die. And then they're getting weaker, and then they get diseases, both deciduous and conifers. So I think we're already there. So I was just wondering if you could reword that. Yeah, and I love all your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just wanted to add something to you. Pointed out that the city of Bellevue has been doing great. I think their tree giveaway program, he said. I think a large aspect of their success, I'm sure Alex could compliment this, has been from them partnering with, I think it's 300 trees,
Yes.
who has been able to really kind of lift it off the ground. I think they have been instrumental in that. So again, looking for collaborations. I don't know what their capacity is to join, but
yeah, I could connect them
if
that helps.
Yes, we have some connections over there as well. And I think it was, you all had some trouble getting in touch with them during the research. But
Yeah.
We'll keep kind of those conversations.
They were at the sustainability fair giving out trees. About 10, maybe a little over, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Ann. Alex, you're next.
I think it's a great program. I think it's a really good outreach tool and education tool to get people starting to get engaged. That initial dip into what we're trying to do, trying to communicate about the ICAP. I agree with Jamie that it's not going to be enough, and that those partnerships are going to be really key. I think we already talked about them, but and especially King Conservation District working, figuring out how to cooperate with them or other partners that are similar. Salmon stuff I can help with. But yeah, any of those partner programs that can come in and help drive that. It's hard to imagine the city having the capacity to do this quickly in the timeline that we have. So figuring out how to either help bring on capacity for extra partners that already have stuff going for them that they can just build upon. And then also with the trees list, and I think Dan and I have talked about this in the past maybe, but considering adding, looking at native species, considering stock newer genetics in these areas that might be able to bring those genetics out that are already adapted to the type of thing that we are, but trying to incorporate natives as much as possible and encouraging landowners as much as possible, or other types of species.
Alex, Praj, I had you next.
Yeah, thanks, Don. So I have a few questions, and the first question actually might be for Stacy. I'm not sure. So the canopy expansion, this project it basically will help the canopy expansion component of the Issaquah policy. So is this specific project, is this a quantitative goal or this is just as much as we can do,
Yeah, so we don't have a program developed yet. The research the students were doing was inform what kind of program we might develop that would be one component supporting our tree canopy expansion. So what we're planning to do is take the research they've done, other research that needs to be done, consider what kind of program might be developed for one that's related to private property, whether it's tree giveaway or incentive programs, and then come back with a proposal. But this is really intended as one tiny piece of the puzzle where Dan can speak to all the other work that's going to be happening to benefit this component and target of the ICAP. Does that answer the question?
Right. So based on that, then I have a couple of suggestions because I had a couple of more questions on that. So I'm guessing, the numbers or the estimates of how many trees you will give away or how many tree coupons you will have or whatever will be decided, right? Based on the research done, and then you will work on it further. And I'm guessing that's how you're going to develop the numbers.
I think that the development of the program, kind of the number of trees that we give away, tree coupons, that'll be figured out kind of as we develop the program. We'll probably start with a pilot first, making sure
Right.
with something that works. And then there will also be, the budget component of how much funding we can have to put towards that.
Right. So just to, I had a couple of suggestions to that based on what Jamie was saying, how many number of trees you're looking at, basically, we want to assume, it's a good goal that all the 100 trees, for example, planted are, growing canopy after 10 years. But in reality, that may not be the case, only 80 trees might be growing or whatnot, especially if residents or, if it's not maintained well and stuff. So that should be considered as a part of the number estimation. And the second point, which I was getting at, and this is from my personal experience, that I am not a gardener. I do plant, but, I do need help with, the support, especially maintaining big trees and, growing big trees. So I was just wondering if there was a way to, add a support component if you're actually running the program, because everybody is putting, like City of Issaquah will be putting a lot of money and effort in trying to grow these trees, so you might as well give, if needed, a little bit support to the residents to help them actually grow them well. I know there are some community groups. There is one in Issaquah where they will, swap out plants. And so there will be a lot of discussions and Facebook groups where they actually help. The community helps each other out to grow plants, that is just something to think about, because if I get something from this program, I want to do my best to actually grow the tree and keep it alive, but I'm not sure if I can do that. That would be all. Thank you.
Dixie, had you?
Yeah, quick question for you guys. We talked about nonprofit partners, but did you guys do any research come across any cities that worked with for-profit businesses? Because we do have REI and it's a and banging the drum of business. I think we could utilize small and large and medium-sized businesses in Issaquah to get the word out, which is, I think we talked about at our retreat as well. One of the things I think we talked about wanting to be better at is communication, and the best way to do that is to work with the people who are working with the people. Who would be great distributors of trees. I would do it. But I couldn't afford to be a sponsor of that, whereas maybe REI could. So I'm just long question. Did you come across any organizations that work with for-profit?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that. I don't think that we did. It often was with a nonprofit organization or with another sort of public entity, like partnering with utilities to provide information about tree giveaway programming or something like that. But I could see an opportunity, yeah, for outreach or education or even some of that implementation support.
Yeah, it seems very valuable to me when you're talking about, from a business standpoint, that traffic into a store is very valuable. And so saying if you can obtain the trees and then saying, hey, business in Issaquah, if you will hand out 1,000 trees, we will give you these trees to hand out. I'd be like, yeah, 1,000 people, great. I think there's probably a lot of people who do that.
Yeah, and also just if you have, again, this goes with the researching the commercial property owner perspectives more. One of the biggest motivations for them is, well, whatever attracts the customers, whatever advertises the business. And so if there's support or research that you can find that would align with that, we're like, well, if people love these really nice trees, remember, like, well, we can get it to you for a discounted price or full price or whatever, you have, I'm sure that would be a large incentive for them. And, REI being in your area, because when we were looking for programs, we mostly focused on what are our peer jurisdictions doing, kind of in like the King, Snohomish, and Pierce County areas. And there weren't any that we found that were pairing with for-profit, but that might be something that someone in California is doing.
With the exception of nurseries, right? There were some
Yes.
for-profit nurseries, right?
That's true, yes.
And most of those partnerships, I think, were to like MOUs to accept a tree coupon. So, you could get the tree coupon and buy it there, and then they would send an invoice to the city. But again, that could be a good opportunity.
I just think if you look at the timeline of 5 to 10 years and how long it takes to, like, when you say it takes 5 to 10 years to get to a tree to a point where it can actually be helpful. And we're talking about 10 years from now, like, we're kind of procrastinating a little bit. So I think, I would agree that, just giving out a tree is probably not enough. And I think we need to be a little more aggressive and thinking outside the box. I'm a big believer in that. Like, what else can we do? We don't have to just choose, one avenue, do we?
So you've heard a lot of comments. Thank you for your work on this. I do support your work. I think this is good work, and I've participated in several tree giveaway programs over the years with limited success. We found they all range all over the place. I do like Dixie's idea of getting the corporations involved. That's an interesting twist. It reminded me of the Subaru ad where they advertised them giving away hundreds of thousands of trees, 1 tree for every car or something like that. So I think there's some different ways to spin this. I would encourage you to consider as part of the urban forestry program. It helps build community efforts. And I love the idea of figuring out how to monitor it. If you can figure out how to do that, just let us know. I'm sure every other municipality would like to know that.
One other thing I'll just add right at the end is, we've been doing this project really closely with Dan. So this is going to get very much incorporated into the urban forest management plan and all this other work. And I'd also note that this is one piece of reaching that 55% goal. This is not going to be the solution here, right? And so we're going to take this, Dan and I, and then quite a number of other folks at the city are going to be looking at what to do with this next. And to Dixie's point, we recognize there's urgency here. So we're going to try and come up with something that we can do in what we hope is a reasonable time frame. So, Dan, any other words?
No, yeah, I know you get to a lot of the agenda, and I do have parallel questions. Really appreciate your feedback. I guess I'll try to keep this really brief, kind of going all the way back to Tom. Yes, the possible planting area or potential planting area will be updated as part of the urban forest management plan. So we should have new data on kind of where to prioritize on public land, residential, commercial, all the stuff you all have been talking about. So that should be really helpful as a guide here too. We'll also have an updated citywide canopy here to share this likely this summer as well. Outside the box thinking, absolutely. So, single trees going to single residential properties, agreed. It might be a smaller drop in the bucket. I also want to say, though, there's a lot of other benefits. This is really focused on our climate action plan and carbon sequestration, but, let's not lose sight of a lot of the other environmental benefits, aesthetic benefits, health benefits that trees provide in our community. Preferred tree list, definitely not comprehensive, but I love how this team kind of put this together through the climate adaptation filter. So that's something we're really looking to include. And this is a really good starting point, but have a fair amount to go in terms of making that a little bit more comprehensive, both for native species and some of the introduced species that grow well in our climate. And then lastly, Anne, you kind of talked about climate adaptation, genetics, and that's something I just want to be real clear. We're really involved with, working with a bunch of kind of regional partners on that, you know, both actually looking at some seed collection co-ops and just in general, some trials on looking at climate adaptation through genetics through our native species range. So yeah, just wanted to, I had a lot of thoughts going, really appreciate all your feedback and look forward to chatting with you all more later this summer on the forest management plan and how this piece ties into that. And then lastly, yeah, big thanks to the Evans team and congratulations on graduation yesterday.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Congratulations.
Must feel good, huh?
Thank you.
Why don't we take a 1 or 2 minute break so you all don't have to stay for the last part?
Okay.
Great. We're gonna take just a real quick break. So the students, well, no longer students, graduated.
Thank you for doing all that work.
Yes, thanks for having us.
You're just awesome job. Felt really lucky that hard.
That's a fun
Your projects.
research project.
Yeah, it was very, it was a lot of work.
We will make them.
There's a lot of images, so you can just sit around and find the pictures.
Starting a little bit late, how much it's different. Yeah. They didn't make sense.
Yeah. I will move quick.
My computer died, so I have to do time. You want to talk about that?
I do, yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's what I like to call it. People are gonna stop going to Inside Gardens pretty soon because they're just kind of like a power breed. I've been, so they mentioned King Conservation District. I've visited plants from them every year for about 20 years, native plants of River Creek. So I'm trying to get rid of the invasives and replant. Slow and break and those red cedar, some willows.
He's got some big trees. Touch grass.
The whole thing. And then cover everything.
Yeah. That's probably a different proceed.
Oh,
Well. Okay.
So far.
we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Have to go around and see if there's any.
Are you in a trip or are you doing?
Great dream.
Big rip.
It's always, that's whenever we get ours out of here, like, to get actually over, it's gonna be a spray, it's gonna be a dribble.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice out.
Then we get it right.
Yeah, I could see that in my future.
What do you think that
We make buyers pay.
Experiment.
You're not, it's free. Just got two.
Okay, next up, we have Stacy's gonna give us a high flyover on the midpoint check-in for the ICAP.
Great. Yes, I recognize it's 8:10. This was intended to be a very brief overview of the presentation. We were not going to go through it in detail, but just wanted to highlight some of the changes based on the feedback. Couple things I'll just say is we've added a lot more content to the slide with the hope that it tells a little bit more of the story without the narrative. And then we've also provided the pretty draft report that will be accompanying the presentation for council. The one thing you haven't seen yet are those one-page project reports that the Gibson interns have been working on. We're still working to get details of those, but they'll be included in the packet. So a couple of things I just wanted to highlight in terms of our approach for the revision of the presentation is that first, we want to start with what's going on in terms of the actions. That's a story that council wants to hear and understand how we're doing on implementing the ICAP. But then we'll be zooming out to talk a little bit bigger picture, things that we have a little bit less control of, and then talking about what our needs are and what changes we might anticipate in the future. As noted, this presentation still drafts, so looking forward to feedback tonight. We're going to be actually doing a dry run with staff next week, both to get them informed on what we're doing in terms of implementation, but also just to run through a practice presentation for council, and then taking that additional feedback to finalize for July 8th. So just wanted to talk a little bit more about how we were structured. We are, again, going to start with kind of the very quick snapshot of where we are in terms of which way our emissions are trending, provide a little bit more detail on how we're approaching implementation, speak to the progress on our actions and where we've been focusing our capacity and resources, and then zoom back out and how does that relate to progress on targets or lack of progress on targets, and then move on to those particular needs. The one thing I'm going to kind of just move forward and be taking feedback. But one thing we really restructured was how we're presenting information on the actions is with each of the focus areas. We want to provide a quick snapshot of here's how all the actions are doing. We've heard feedback about incorporating content from the dashboard. And then we'll be briefly highlighting a few of the projects. We are not planning to speak to data or go into much detail with these projects, but we'll be referring back to the detailed ICAP report that will provide all the data related to the projects. So our plan is to go through that kind of action snapshot for each of the focus areas. And then we'll be zooming back out and looking at what does that translate into how we're doing in our targets. These next couple slides, we're still playing around to see if we can condense things. But what we wanted to do here was talk about kind of major takeaway messages for each of our focus areas and their targets. So we'll have kind of what's our top line messaging for each of those targets. Go into some of the data and show kind of where our targets are and where we currently are, what those trends currently look like. Do that for each of the focus areas. And then we have a slide that highlights some of our needs specific to those focus areas. Forward. So we repeat that. And then I think we're still figuring out exactly where the wedge fits in, but that was something we heard that where there was interest about. This is really talking about where can we have impact. And we'll be describing this in more detail, but essentially the solid colors are where federal, state, regional policies have the ability to reduce our emissions. Dotted areas are where local or regional action could really play. And what this essentially is saying at a high level is buildings, transportation is where we have the opportunity for the most impact. So that'll speak a little bit to where we are and where we're headed. So we'll be summarizing kind of how we're doing in terms of implementing our actions, brief summary of where those targets are, what our takeaway messages were for some of those targets, and then also highlighting that value of the partnerships and being a leader in some areas. And then kind of our last main messaging will be kind of what our needs are in terms of needs from council support. And also just a bit of a foreshadowing of where we'll be focusing our efforts, primarily around advancing our work in energy and buildings, transportation, the need to continue to identify barriers and creative solutions for overcoming those barriers, give some examples of that, and then really that need for council leadership and the potential to be ready for some hard conversations around policy in the future if we continue to see progress on targets. So that's kind of how we've restructured. And so wanted, again, that was a flyover of what the presentation looks like. We've gotten some great written feedback and we'll be continuing to make revisions to it. Also looking at ways where we might be able to remove any duplication of content. But wanted to give the board another chance to see that and see if you have any feedback on the structure of the presentation. And then if anyone had time to look at the report, any general comments on that report as we work to clean that up prior to sending to council. Anything, David, you want to add?
Feels more transparent to me. Last one we saw, it feels more like it's speaking to the need of, hey, we're doing a few good things, but we're not going to get there without, really putting a lot of effort into this. So thank you for making the changes.
Yes.
Thank you. No, I think a lot of the new content's really great. Thank you for putting in that wedge analysis. That was probably because I've been pounding. But I do think in terms of organization, I found it kind of confusing and like I didn't have the context going into the actions. Like a lot of the graphs that you added, like I wanted to know the story before I knew the specifics, and I didn't know the whole story until I was at the end of the presentation. So my preference would have been that was more upfront and that you know the context going in. The other piece that I know is challenging because it wasn't really structured into the original ICAP, but I do think the way that we track progress of just being like, yes, no, like, are we doing it? Is it done? Like, I know that we don't have specific measures, but being able to identify, has it met expectations? Are we seeing impacts? Like that would be, if I was council, I'd want to know one, like, what's going on? What have we done? What has worked? And that staff is evaluating progress and reprioritizing, which I know you guys are doing, but it doesn't necessarily come across in the presentation. Like I would love basically a matrix or a dashboard that showed like the red, yellow, green report is something that I'm always a big fan of like impact and performance expectation on programs and actions. So that's the one thing that I thought was still maybe missing. And then there's some kind of it felt like a little bit like going around. But I thought overall that the additions were great and that a lot of the content that was added was, and now I think it's probably just about how do you kind of distill it down to what you really, the message you want to get across. And I do think the overarching message that we're not on target, that's the other concern I have with not having that up front, is that's kind of put at the end. It's not context for the actions. And I think you'll probably mention it early on, but that's like, I struggle to not have the context for what's going on at the highest level before I dive into the details. So yeah, but no, I appreciate all the work you guys have done.
Yeah, I think it's much better. I'm going to comment just on one slide, and it's the summary of where we are, but it's the third slide. And I think you should ditch it. Okay. Only because it's very like, we're making progress, but we have ways to go. It feels like it's not the strongest position to start the presentation from. Like if you were trying to pitch me, I think you're trying to sell something, right? Like I think that it's good to think about it that way. And if you're trying to pitch me, I don't know, I think it might shut me off a little bit. So I think you can have a stronger start so that the rest of the information is more impactful, because of course we're making progress. There's a board. I think to me it almost feels like that should be secondary. Like that should be we're making progress. but let's talk about what we're not doing, because that's really what's important. In my opinion, like, so I think there's probably a better way to start it, stronger.
In response to that, I'm thinking that maybe you did that because we want to make sure, because of some feedback that we gave last time, that we want to make sure that the city council realizes that we're doing a ton of stuff and it's really amazing, but we're going to still need a lot more support as far as budget goes, right? And so that might be why that's happening.
Yeah, but I think there's some, you can take that comment, kind of play around with it.
It's still, it's good. It's just, you know, there's just like, you're trying to stir a feeling at the very beginning to get them like really, you know, they know the budget, they write the checks, they know the work, you know, so not to say there shouldn't be. Like, I think that's what I was trying to say, just like a little more.
Yeah, and the grants are just like way to go with all the grants. Even more, what, 3 million or something for next year?
From the HERE grant, in terms of grant.
Oh, so there's like $3 million in grants for next.
Oh, I think more than, well, Energy Smart, you said, just got a $3 million grant. So, but yeah, I think for what's coming this fall, maybe not quite that much.
Thank you. For calling the Climate Commitment Act out as one of the grantee.
Big part of our company. This is still a couple weeks away before we have to send in a packet to council. So if folks have additional written feedback, please send it in. And like I said, we're going to do a dry run with staff next week. So we're taking that feedback as well.
Okay. We're sending that out.
Oh, no, you ahead.
I was wondering if you're going to send out the updated.
Yeah, we can do that. Absolutely.
I just wanted to say, I read through the whole thing and thought it was really amazing. So, but I don't, you know, for me, it worked out great.
And that was the
But
report.
everybody has, yeah, the report that you're going to give to city council.
Great.
Yeah. But I'm not saying, but other people have really great thoughts as well. So I just wanted to say that was my perspective.
And you're just looking to collect comments on over email from this point on?
Yeah, I think that would be great. We're not right back because our packet will be due to council in 2 weeks. So, but yeah, we'd love additional comment. Anne submitted some great comments last night. So we'll be looking through the modifications to the presentation on this.
All right, you had a couple of updates for us?
Yeah, real quick, I included the same slides from the last meeting on our budget process, but didn't have time to talk. So I'm going to take just 2 minutes and go really quickly through the budget slides. So first, I'll just say that we are very lucky here that we have a dedicated source of funding for our sustainability work. It's the administrative fee on the recology contract, and it's a pretty flexible fee that we can change on an annual basis. It supports our staffing, programming, ICAP implementation, solid waste work, especially with our new solid waste staff. She's been working on her budget needs. So yeah, we're just very lucky compared to other cities where they're having to compete against every other department for funding. For 23-24, we had a budget of 820,000. That is not revenue generated from that fund that year. That was just our budget request. What we are currently in the process of doing is finalizing the revenue request for the next biennium so that David and I can then submit our budget. We're anticipating projected revenue of about 660,000 a year. And we are currently in conversations about whether or not we're going to change the administrative fee for this fund to generate additional revenue or not.
And so it would be the 660 times 2 to compare that to the past biennium. So it'd be a net increase of like 50%.
That's correct, but with additional staffing, that's.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure I understand your direction.
Yeah, we'll provide more details. Our budgets are due in July. So our approach to developing our budget request is we've been looking at our plan for implementing ICAP, really looking in at those high priority projects that we feel will have the biggest impact. We're considering what grants are coming in the near future, as well as more longer term future. And then we've also been in conversations with departments from across the city to see where we can collaborate on projects, where we might be able to provide some matching funds for projects that they're planning to take the lead on. These are just the categories of what we anticipate are larger components of our budget being going forward. Bulk really focused on the built environment, including continuation of our residential and commercial energy efficiency and electrification campaigns and incentives. We'll be looking to supplement grants for EV charging, and then also providing some cost share for work being done in our own buildings for both fossil fuel transition as well as renewable energy. We have a few kind of miscellaneous items too that'll be a component of our budget. We're looking to work with PSC to complete the transition of our streetlights to LEDs. We're going to need some facilitation support to help update our ICAP for 26, and then continuation of our resilience initiatives, as well as enhanced communication tools for the public. So those are kind of the main categories. There's a lot of additional kind of small projects in there. And then, of course, I forgot to mention staffing. The budget does cover David, myself, and then our solid waste analysts and civic spark fellows that we bring on consulting support. That's all within that budget. That's correct. Yeah. So right now our finance staff is just finalizing forecast revenues. David and I are refining all our wish lists of all the projects, both for our projects as well as working with departments. We'll be submitting capital budget requests this month, and then our additional requests next month. I believe council will see the packet in September, but we'll keep you updated on that date as things move forward to them. And then approval is typically with the last finance budget. We'll keep you updated as those dates are released to staff. That's a very quick update on where we are and kind of our approach, and happy to share more as we further.
Questions? All right, last topic. Okay.
I'm sorry, I stepped out when you were talking about the draft, the one that said draft on it, at the bottom of the page or the agenda. So how are we supposed to, would you like us to respond to that somehow as well? I read through mostly like the presentation for the city council.
Oh, for the draft report?
Yeah.
Yes, please. If you have written feedback on that, please go ahead and send it to us. Our plan is to submit that with the council packet in the next 2 weeks. Okay. We're happy to hop on a phone call.
Thanks, Stacey. All right, lastly for the night, I want to give a chance for our youth members to give a report if they so choose. Nina, Karen?
Besides the updates that CNN and Zoe both gave, I think that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you, guys. I think that concludes our meeting tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
30 seconds.
No.